welcome to another episode of the Veterans History Project brought to you by the Lawrence County Museum. I'm Brad Bough. I'm the Lawrence County, Indiana Veterans Service Officer, and along with me today is my co-host, renowned World War II veteran, soon to be 100 years old, Lee Hutchinson. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, thank you. Welcome to our weekly program. We're interviewing veterans today from Vietnam era.
The two veterans that we have with us this afternoon, Ron Knight, Vietnam veteran, and Steve Sons. And Steve served during the Vietnam War in Korea, on the demilitarized zone in Korea. Welcome, gentlemen. Really appreciate you coming and being a part of the history program for Vietnam era veterans. Ron, where did you go to basic training at?
Okay, I can give you a little summary here. I had 33 years in the military. Now, a lot of that was in the Guards, but basically, in December of '60, I worked at Loudon's on Fifth Street, and there was a guy who worked there, and he said, "Come out the Guards," and I went out there in December of '60, and I joined the Guards, and I didn't go to basic till after I graduated high school, and I went to Fort Leavenworth, Missouri in '61, and then I went to Fort Knox following that, and I was a tanker. The Guard unit was a tank unit. And then I was in the Guards as just enlisted for several years, just doing weekend training. And we went from a tank company to a maintenance company. And then in 1966, I graduated from the Indiana Military Academy, which was a state-run OCS program, which took a year. You went to weekend drills and 2 summer camps, and I got commissioned as a second lieutenant ordnance corps. And I got up to E5 before I got commissioned. And I was in the Guards as a lieutenant for a while. I was stationed in a maintenance unit in Evansville for a while. And then in 1960, I went on active duty as a Guard officer from 1968 to 1973. I applied for active duty, volunteer active duty, and I went on active duty. I was on active duty for 3 years. The first assignment, I was assigned to Fort Bragg, and I went to some ordnance officer schools, the basic course, the advanced, and I went to Command General Staff College later. But anyway, at Fort Bragg, I was in the 503rd Heavy Equipment Maintenance Company. It was a corps maintenance company. And a general come over, and I got some little tidbits I like to put in here, and if I too long. But anyway, when I was stationed at Bragg, I was under the 1st COSCOM, which then was the 12th Support Brigade, and General Creighton Abrams was the Corps commander. He was a 3-star general, and there was a Corps headquarters there. He come over and visited our unit one time and come into where I was, and I was a lieutenant. I was over the service section, and he said, "How you doing, Lieutenant?" But the famous Creighton Abrams, who was the battalion commander for Patton, and who the Creighton tank's named after. And then from there, I went to EOD school, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, which is the Army Bomb Squad or Military Bomb Squad. Well, the EOD school is run by the Navy, but it was at Indian Head in Maryland then. Now it's at Eglin Air Force Base. But EOD school is run by the Navy, but all branches go to there. Now, a Navy guy has to be a diver. So I went to Indian Head, Maryland, to EOD school and graduated. And out of EOD school, I got assigned to the 287th EOD unit in Vietnam. EOD detachment, now they're 33-man companies, but back then they were 15-man detachments. And there's all EOD techs, except one person in the unit was a clerk. And I was in the 287th, and I seen quite a bit of action there. And can I keep going? And anyway, I had some I went on we was like a fire department. You know, the infantry would be out in the bush, and a lot of these bombs they made at Crane and places. You know, the B-52s would drop them 250, 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs. Well, a lot of them didn't go off. And then we was trained in all explosive devices. And basically, an EOD team's like a fire department. You know, if the infantry was out there or they had incidents, they'd call the EOD team. We'd go there and take care of it. And I went on a combat assault one time where a Cobra helicopter, this is in 71, a Cobra helicopter had went down for the 101st Airborne. Well, they was trying to, a Cobra is two guys, you know, the gunship. And while they was trying to find this Cobra, they found another Cobra helicopter that had crashed in the jungle and had laid out there for 2 years, pilots still in it and all that. Well, we did a combat assault to get to the bodies, you know, to recover, and the infantry dropped down and did security, and then the engineers come blew the treetops off and then dropped people down, and we had to hack a path through the jungle to the crash site. Well, the enemy had never got to the aircraft, but the Cobra come in and crashed them upside down and burnt, and there were still rockets. They were still rockets and the Gatling gun on it. And I helped Grace Restoration people. You know, they had to recover what they could. They knew who it was, but they had to recover what they could. And I helped them. You know, they had their little things they put dirt in and all that, and they recovered their bayonet. The leather part on their bayonet had laid out there so long the leather was decayed, and the wooden handle on the 38th revolver they carried. And then after they said, Graves Registration told the infantry task force commander, said, we got what we can get. And the infantry task force commander, I mean, it was a big operation, and said, blow it, EOD. And we blew it non-electric, C4 and all that. And usually in EOD, if you blow up something, you always go back in. After it goes off, you go back in and check.
Tell me what you're doing when you blow up something.
Well, it's C4.
I mean, tell the people, what do you do when you go out with
Okay,
a bomb?
in EOD back in them days, we had C4. It was a plastic explosive. It's kind of like putty. And it comes in sticks like that. And we in EOD you fire electrically. You can fire a blasting cap electrically, or you can fire them non-electric. Well, we fired out there. We fired non-electric. And in EOD, you always put two caps. You put two blasting caps in the shot because, you know, make sure it goes off. You just don't do one.
How far away did you stand after that?
Well, after you pull safety fuse. See, there's like this Cobra helicopter. There's a det cord that run around the helicopter, which det cord is pretty. It intensifies the blow. You know, it helps blow it up, and then you got time fuse. So we'd pull it, and then we walked out. Now, most cases, we'd walk out, you know, 15 or 20 minutes, and then listen go off, and then you go back and check that everything went off. And in explosive, you got a high order or a low order. High order is where everything goes. All explosive device goes. Low order is some of it don't go off. But anyway, in this case, the task force commander said pull it, and we never went back in. We went out the same path, and then helicopters picked us up and took us back to base. But them two guys laid there for 2 years. Okay, another.
Wait a minute. Now they took the bodies out, and you blew up the helicopter.
Yeah, but there wasn't much left of them. And Grace Restoration got what? You know, there wasn't. You know, there wasn't much. There wasn't much to them, I guess.
I got that picture.
I guess. And anyway, and it had rockets and the Gatling gun on it, and the enemy had never got to it. And another thing, we used to have to go down to Grace Restoration. You know, somebody get killed, and they'd bring them in. And the Army has their own morticians, Grace Restoration, and we used to have to go down there some to. One time they brought in a guy that'd been hit by artillery, and he was all pretty bad shape, and he carried a 40 millimeter grenade launcher, which is called an M79. And it's like a big shotgun shell, and it's a grenade that fires out. Well, he had made a jacket like a hunter's jacket for all them 40 millimeters, and he had that on. So Grace Registration called us, and we had to go down there and you know, take that off of. And it really didn't bother me till I did see the guy's wedding ring on his body. And
What was the biggest bomb you ever fooled with?
I did 1,000-pound bombs. And one time they called us out, and we had a big bomb, and they wanted us to blow it, but there was so much enemy or infantry activity going on, we couldn't blow it. But we'd go out. I've blown up many of these 250, 500 bombs. They be, the B-52s drop them, they didn't go off. And okay, and then I was over there like last part of the Vietnam War, and they started fragging people. The guy get mad at his company commander, and or the officers and NCOs, and I seen 2 bad incidents of that the EOD got called out. This one company commander, they didn't like him, so they took a live grenade and pulled the spoon and put electrician tape around the grenade, and then pulled the spoon and put in the gas can, in the gas tank of the Jeep. Well, he killed the driver too, but killed the commander to a captain. And then one time we got called out. They had a scout dog platoon there at Bough, and a dog handler and a dog, and them dogs and their handler would be assigned to infantry units. See, well, they had a sergeant E7 there that was was a platoon sergeant. So this one guy him and his dog had been sent out to the infantry, for a month or something. Well, this E7, while them guys would go on, he would go through and search through their personal belongings while they was gone from the platoon and search for drugs. Well, one of the GIs, that didn't go over well. And one GI that we had, over in Vietnam, you had plywood buildings and tin roofs and sandbag walls. Well, this guy didn't like this E7, so he took, what a claymore mine is. A claymore mine it's got ball bearings in it, and it's about like that, and it'll just shoot out thousands of ball bearings. So this guy knew where this Sergeant E7 was, and he went up and planted a claymore mine right on the sandbags, and it was like a foot from the sergeant's head. And he went, it's fired electric. He went back and hit the clicker, and they called us. There wasn't nothing we could do. And then, we do anything. And we had SARNs and we had red fender vehicles, and we was emergency vehicles and all that. And then I got hurt in Vietnam. I didn't get shot, but I was in my 10th month, and I broke my ankle rappelling, and I got medevaced out of Vietnam, which was quite a military system. I was out in the bush, and a medevac helicopter come in and picked me up, and en route they picked up an ARVN soldier, and the medic worked on the ARVN soldier on the helicopter. They had a medic on there, and that ARVN soldier, the South Vietnam soldier, died. But they got me to Phu Bai. I was in the Army hospital at Phu Bai one night. Next night I was in Da Nang at the Army. They put me on a C-130 and flew me to Da Nang. I couldn't walk. I was a litter case. And third night I was in Da Nang, and the third night I was in a hospital in Japan. I come over on them big fancy Air Force, Air Force hospital ships, and we were stacked in our litters. They could hook litters to the racks inside the aircraft, and there was one guy above me and a guy behind. But in the front of the aircraft was a emergency room, and there was a doctor and emergency people there if you got bad, And then from Japan, they flew me to Scott Air Force Base, and I spent some time there. And then they flew me in a more of a commercial Air Force hospital plane and flew me to Louisville, and then Louisville picked me up in the ambulance, but that Air Force plane, when they landed at Louisville, they stopped traffic. Said, the medical planes come. So that's kind
Let's see, what do you run into? Have you had any big experiences like that in Korea?
Oh, I can't keep up with that.
Well, tell us something about it.
Okay, well, I was drafted July 10th, 1970, and I went to Fort Knox for basic training there, and then I went to Fort Bliss, Texas for fire control operator for a Hawk missile. That was my MO. And so I stayed there a while, and then I got my orders. I thought I was going to go to Nam, but it took me out of Nam in 1967. This was 71. And so they sent either go to Germany or Korea. Well, I ended up going to Korea, which at the time was considered a hardship tour. I mean, it stunk. I mean, it took me 2 weeks to get used to smell in the country. But anyway, we got over there, and I went to my unit. Well, when I got to my unit, the sergeant major said, "Well, right now you're not needed on tax site, so can you type or you're going to be a mailman?" When a guy from Vincennes named Hargrove was with me, and I said, "I took care of typing school. Well, I got to do the typing thing for a while, which one finger deals." But so I stayed there for about a month, and the guy finally come back to States, and I went back up to tax site and done that. But really, you're on 24, you're off 24, and you rotated, had a 48-hour thing, which wasn't much deal with her. You know, that little village there, Pawanee was actually the name of the village. But off time, we just spent in the NCO club and going to the village some. But far as action type, I can't compare it to his. But one night I was on tax site, we got a call from the 8th Army headquarters in Seoul. It said you need to be put in alert. Well, so we had to fulfill the helmet, and I was sitting there with the M60 looking down over the hill. Had 2 rows of concertina wire coming up tax site, but all of a sudden you heard some firing and knocked back and come back, and they said, "Okay, you're all clear." What happened then, the South Korean Marines had caught these North Koreans coming up to our tax site. They just lined them up and shot them.
Got them all.
Yeah, they got them all and just lined up and shot them. But other than that, I got my deuce and a half license while I was in there. And like I said, switchback going, it was the highest mountain in South Korea. And that had switchback. Well, I got my deuce and a half license, so Lieutenant, you could drive us up the hill. Well, weather's a lot like here, just a little colder. But it got ice. We come out of that gate and site, and that truck started sliding. I had all the guys in back. So luckily, I was running to the side of the mountain to slow it down, you know, before I got that switchback. Because I went straight over, I hadn't. But, you know, that and I don't know, that's not too much. I can't compare wrong. But
How did they transport you to Korea? Did you fly on big ships?
Yeah, fly, big plane. Mm-hmm. And we flew from Fort Lewis, the airfield right next
McCord Air Force Base.
Yeah. McCord to Japan, laid over there a little bit, and then went to Seoul, which is Kempo Airfield.
Okay.
And so.
Yeah, but the bottom line is you did what you were told. It's the military. Whether you go to Vietnam or Germany or, in your case, Korea, you go where you're told.
I will tell you this. When I got out, I got an early out because of the hardship tour. I was only in service 19 months, but I got early out because they wanted to put stations back in the States for that short amount of time. So we got an early out, 5-month early out.
That was very normal if you were coming from any overseas location. If you didn't have 6 months retainability, they would just go ahead and discharge you. In a lot of cases, they still do that today.
But you know, after it's all said and done, I had more respect for this country after seeing other people living overseas. And I tell you what, I went to a BNL ball game out there, BNL ball game first opened, when it first started out there. And I got emotional when they played the national anthem.
We're entitled to salute now when the national anthem is played.
Yeah, but back then, I just got home.
That's right.
It made you feel different.
President Bush 43 signed that into law, where veterans, when the national anthem is played, they can salute as opposed to putting your hand over your heart. You can even leave your hat on while you're saluting.
Yeah, but it was a good thing for me. I was scared when I went, but it was a good thing for me. Of course, everybody was scared, I guess. I got drafted.
That's what I was going to say. You got drafted. You didn't have a choice. You just went.
Yeah, but it was an experience.
And do you have some memorabilia to share there with the audience?
Well, I just kind of like the mountain we was on here. I think we're here. here's my buddy from Valparaiso. We were good buddies. He flew back home with me on mid-tour. Charles Villa, he's from Valparaiso.
Yeah, just turn and hold it toward, yeah, there you go.
Valparaiso. He was a good friend of mine. And I seen him here about 5 years ago when we retired up in Valparaiso at U.S. Steel, and we had a nice meeting with him. And here's me when I was drafted.
That's your basic training.
yeah.
18?
No, I was almost 21. I missed my 21st birthday
Okay.
by 12 days. So I had my 21st birthday in basic training.
Yeah.
But that and, yeah, like the others, I don't know. We can't.
Well, by the time you were drafted into the Army, the Air Force had control of the skies over Vietnam, so we did not need the Hawk missiles
Right.
that you were manning in Korea. And we did need them in Korea because there was always a chance of the North Koreans or the Chinese coming across the DMZ.
Yeah, and that's how we could look into North Korea from our tax site. And then we're about 5 miles from Panmunjom, where our base camp was down there. So, but anyway, here, talk about pictures. This Dean Martin's Gold Diggers, remember them?
Sure, they come over and entertain.
Yeah, you have hope.
Yeah, when I was in Korea, the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders came, same thing basically.
And then, let's see, I don't know if you can get a camera in on these, but yeah, right here's the site, our tax site. I know we can't see it over there, but let's see. That's looking into North Korea right there. You can see North Korea right there. You know, but anyway, then this another USO show, Sebastian Cabot.
Oh, you got his autograph. even.
Yeah, he come up tax side when we was there.
Mr. French.
Yeah, right. But then other than that, but
And
No,
the
this is-
characters in the show were all from Terre Haute, Indiana, other than Mr. French.
yeah,
Uncle
yeah.
Bill and Buffy and Jody and Sissy were all
Yeah.
from Terre Haute.
And here's a picture graduating basic training Fort Knox.
Okay,
When I graduated Fort Knox,
that's a tradition.
Yeah.
Everybody has to.
everybody gets a picture.
Yeah,
Of it.
exactly. Your basic training.
Not 40, 40 for a barracks.
yeah, but and then this other one, this is a scrapbook of Korean. We had on our tax site we had called Katusas, which is a Korean amendment to the United States Army. We were training them to take over that tax site.
Yeah, the Korean augmentees.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So we had a lot of Koreans around there. Had a Korean unit right on our base. There's another Korean unit there. Boy, talk about being hard on soldiers. That commander, I seen him slap them many a time. The Korean when they line up there and do something wrong, they'd slap him.
You got one too? don't
Yeah,
you?
I'd like to show you a picture, and then I like to talk. After I come back from Vietnam, I got assigned to the 58th EOD in Fort MacArthur, California, and if I could have about 10 minutes. But in Vietnam, a lot of the ammo supply points, they had big ammo supply points where they, they were big places where they issued out ammo. Well, this is a picture of me. A lot of that ammo and them ammo supply points would get suspended or old, and it had to be blowed up. And there's an article with me in it. The 101st, this is the 101st Airborne newspaper, and
Hold it up where you can see it on that camera.
But anyway,
Yeah.
it was a lot of stuff, and and them other soldiers ammo humpers. Well, one time we did one of these. They bring in 5 or 6 5-ton, big truckloads of stuff to blow up, and we'd pile it up, and then we'd blow it up, not electric. But anyway, one time some ammo humpers, and a couple of them was minorities, and they was up in the truck unloading stuff, to the ground, to guys on the ground, to pile, you pile it up in a big pile like that, and a grenade, it wasn't a live grenade, it was one of them flares, one of them smoke grenades. Well, one of them dropped and went off, I guess, and they threw it out in the grass there, and I I grabbed it and threw it way out in the field. But a couple of them GIs was in that truck, somebody hollered grenade, and boy, they just jumped out the side.
Well, yeah, with the bombs.
But it was just a smoke grenade. But I like to talk about the 58th EOD, which was a unique assignment. When I was in the hospital at Fort Knox, I called DA and I said, "Where's my next assignment?" And they said, "You're scheduled to go to the 58th EOD detachment, Fort MacArthur, California." And but that unit, when I went to the 58th, I was there from 71 to 73, and that unit was a designated presidential support unit. See, the Secret Service used to use the military EOD people, and the Army is the ones that supported it mostly. And we wore civilian clothes, and they rented civilian cars. And I had a top secret clearance in EOD because we were trained to disarm nuclear weapons too. And if you had rank to it, you was an E6. But anyway, I had to have a White House clearance. So I got my White House clearance, and that unit was a designated presidential support unit, and that was when Nixon was president. And he used to go to the Western White House in San Clemente, and I seen some things that you'd never, but he would go down to San Clemente, and he'd fly into El Toro Marine Base and Air Force One, and we used to have, EOD had to go there, and check. One time, we wore civilian clothes, so one time, the Air Force One was I think it was El Toro Marine Base, big, and this full colonel, he took us in a Air Force pickup truck, and he was a colonel. He didn't know I was a captain, and we went out and kind of drove the flight line, checked for bombs. And he said, "Anything else, sir? Anything else, sir?" I never did tell that guy I was just a captain. He was a full colonel. But anyway, and then Nixon would fly in the presidential helicopter to San Clemente. And EOD there, San Clemente was it's south of, you ever heard of San Juan Castrama where the birds come in? And it was a compound there, and it was a Western High. Well, we used to have to go in there and kind of, before Nixon got to San Clemente, we had to go in there and we worked. The Secret Service has the guys with the guns, and then they have technical guys. And we worked with the technical guys, and we have to go in there and check everything. The Western White House and he had an office there, and that was the Western White House. But anyway, I've put coveralls on and crawled under the building to check for. And I've said it. I think Mary Rose Woods, his secretary. When he got me impeached and all that, Mary Rose. I think I accidentally hit. We'd check her office and his office and all that. I might have hit that button on that, erased all them tapes. No, I just. But anyway, and we did others. We got called out doing other Secret Service stuff. I went to the Super Bowl in 1972, I think. It was in Los Angeles. It's the year the Dolphins went undefeated. And I was part of security, and I wore a suit and stuff. And we was right down on the football field. We was part of security with Secret Service. I went to the Rose Bowl parade. I went to Rose Bowl football game. I went to the Ontario 500. And I met a lot of movies. Is it okay? Keep talking. But anyway, I met one famous person that I met at Fort MacArthur. He was a 5-star general. He never retired. His name was Omar Bradley. And Omar Bradley, in his last day, see, a 5-star general never retires. And Omar Bradley lived there in Southern California, and he had a 12-man Army staff. Well, he come over to Fort MacArthur one time for a deal, and I went up and shook hands. I have a personal autographed picture signed by Omar Bradley. He's in uniform, with collared uniform. I met one day, and I was out there during the 72 elections when Nixon run against George McGovern, and Shirley Chisholm run for president. You remember Shirley Chisholm? She was a black congressman who run for president.
Congresswoman from New York.
And see, all them people got Secret Service, and we worked them details. And anyway, and a lot of them had big shindigs. I went to a hotel there. We worked Beverly Hills and Century City and Los Angeles. Well, Nixon had a fundraising one time, and it was $1,000 a plate at this hotel. and it was $1,000 plate. About a week later, my governor had the same deal, same meal, same deal at $50. And but I met some famous John Wayne one time. We'd be out in the hallways and check. So EOD part of it is a dog and pony show. You kind of check stuff. And John Wayne cut in between me, and I said, "How you doing, Duke?" And he didn't turn around and say, "How you doing, Pilgrim?" or nothing. And then Lee Marvin stopped me one time in the hallway at one of them hotels and said, "Where's the restroom?" And I met Kirk Douglas and the boys. I've seen Josh Kabor. I've seen Max Bear, Jethro. I've seen him. But we'd go to them shindigs, them deals like the Ontario 500, and we'd be up in the suite right with all the movie stars and stuff. And here's an interesting story. One time, Pat Nixon, Richard Nixon's wife, little tiny gal, well, she went out. She was in a big hotel in Century City or Los Angeles somewhere, and she had a suite. Well, she went out on a speaking engagement, see, and we sent an EOD. In EOD then, you worked in two-man teams. If Fred, you're cutting the wrong wire, it's kind of a two-guy deal. And we had an EOD team, another EOD guys, and me and another EOD guy was kind of off duty. So the Secret Service said, could you two of you guys stay in her suite while she's going for about 3 hours? And it was a suite, and front room and a bedroom. And we just sat in there for 3 hours and watched TV. But on the bed, in the bedroom, was her personal suitcase. And it was one of them suitcases opens like a court, and it was open, and her personal stuff was there. Now, I've always kidded people but I never, I had a White House clearance, and if you did something wrong, but her personal suitcase is there. And we was in there while she's out. And then I went to a funeral one time. Richard Nixon's aunt. Am I taking your time?
No, I'm listening.
But anyway, I went to a funeral one time where some Richard Nixon's relation died, and we went to the funeral home before he got there, and we checked for stuff, And I respect the dead, but I was doing my job for the President of the United States. Well, Nixon was going to sit right here, and the casket was right up there, see? And part of it, you just kind of use your own common sense. And I thought, well, they could plant a bomb under the pillow of the deceased, and I respect the dead, but I was doing my job. So I nonchalantly reached under his pillow to check for a bomb. Well, his false teeth was in there. I got his false teeth till I was standing up on. And then after the funeral, the Secret Service agent said, we had a civilian, the Army rented us civilian cars. We didn't drive around in Jeeps and Army uniform. And I drove in I was the 11th car in the presidential motorcade that went down through Los Angeles. I think it went back to San Clemente or something. And, they'd shut down the freeways, the presidential motorcade had. And then when they went down into towns, motorcycle cops would go ahead and block the side streets and all that. And, okay. And, but one time the Secret Service found it was at a hotel and somebody was getting Secret Service support. They said, EOD, there's a lunch bucket out here, out in the hallway or something. EOD, go take care of it. And, and EOD, in a situation of a bomb, they would never, like the president's going somewhere and we found a bomb, he would never go there. But anyway, me and Richard Bravo, he was a Chicano guy. He was an EOD guy, E5. And we went over and seen that lunch bucket. And and part of EOD, you do stuff remotely. There's procedures to do it remotely, but we just went over and said, what do you think, Richard? And we opened the lunch bucket up, and it's somebody's lunch. Now, I'm glad it wasn't a booby trap. And
our guys worked with you guys, though, too, being in K-9. I was a drug dog handler, but our bomb dog explosive detector dog handlers worked with you guys, but you didn't have one to sniff the lunch bucket.
Yeah, but we never used dogs. But
we just used bombs all over Europe. We just bombed the hell out of Europe.
But and here's another story.
You didn't hear me, did you?
Huh?
You didn't slow down. We dropped bombs all over Europe. Where were you?
Well, I wasn't. I was a kid. But anyway, one time Agnew was the vice president, Frank Agnew.
Spiro,
Sparrow Wagner. He was a
Spiro,
crook.
oh, yeah.
Well, he used to go to Palm Springs.
governor of Maryland before vice
Yeah,
president.
he used to go to Palm Springs and stay at Frank Sinatra's house. And so we'd go, he got Secret Service, and we'd go on missions to him to Palm Springs. And let's see. Well, and then I got off active duty in '73, and then I was full time for the Indiana National Guards for from '73 to '94. And I retired as a major full time. I worked at Stout Field and Atterbury, but I retired as a major. And I qualified for lieutenant colonel, but there's politics, and I did all right. I draw a good retirement. I couldn't draw a retirement till I was 60, but I draw a good retirement. And for Vietnam, I got the Bronze Star, and then at the end of my career, I got a Meritorious Service Medal, which I'm kind of proud of. But I got a Bronze Star in Vietnam. But I seen some unique things, and. But St. Clemente, oh, did I tell you about Nick? Here's another story at St. Clemente. Nixon had a travel trailer there. He had a travel trailer at St. Clemente, and St. Clemente was near San Diego Marine Base. And he would go down to the beach, and every morning, EOD, we had a trailer there, and everything that went to the Western White House had to go through us, and we had to examine it or x-ray it, and then we took it down to the military, and it was taken down to the military aids, but everything went through the EOD team. We had a trailer there, and we used to have check that travel trailer every morning, see? And one time they said Nixon's going swimming today, and they take that travel trailer down on the beach, the Marine base on the beach, and park it, and so we'd go down there before he got there, and stuff, and we'd check the trailer and the beach and all this stuff. And then the Secret Service said, Nixon's coming. And we had to take our car. There'd be two guys. In the EOD, you worked in two guys. So we had to take our car and kind of hide it behind a hill somewhere. And we had to sit there in our car all the time that Nixon was there. We stayed there while he was there. But one time they had a fundraising thing for Nixon where he come in a helicopter, and they brought the public in to greet him, and I was right there, and I was close to you and me to Nixon. I mean, we didn't say, Richard and Ron and stuff, but I was as close to you, and the crowd kind of started mobbing them, and I was part of it, we kind of had to hold them back, and they tried to steal his cufflink. And now when I left that duty there, I was presented by the Secret Service with I have a tie tack and cufflinks. It's the presidential cufflinks, and the tie tack is the presidential seal, and the bar has his autograph on it. And that's
that's something. When you came back do you come back to the Guard?
Yeah. When I come off active duty, I got caught on the reduction in force after Vietnam. I didn't have college, and when I got off active duty, I called the Indiana Guards, and I come back, and I was a part-timer for about a year or two, and then I got on full-time.
What were you doing with the Guard after all that?
I was in the maintenance company. I was a property book officer, and I was an operations officer for the maintenance battalion. And then I was at one time, we had a DISCOM, which is a major command. It was over the S&T battalion, the medical battalion, and the maintenance battalion. And I wasn't a commander, but I was a senior full-time guy. And then part of my career for about 2 years, I was a senior full-time guy at Atterbury at Troop Command. Now, Atterbury's got Atterbury, the post, but there's a unit command down there. It's called Troop Command. And
that's Guard.
Huh?
That's the National Guard?
Yeah, and the Troop Command. And we had 5 units. We had about 15 units under and say each unit had about 3 people full-time. Now, we had units over the state for Troop Command. One of them was a postal unit in Michigan City, Indiana. It was a Army postal unit. And during the war, they got activated as a postal unit during, one of the early wars.
Desert Storm or
something. Or something. But Desert Storm, they got activated. But
How many? You have any idea how many are in the National Guard out here now?
out here, I don't know. It used to be a tank.
Yeah,
It
I
used-
was in there for
Yeah.
as a tank
Now-
way back in the 50s.
There's some history, and over at the Legion, there's 4 pictures. Well, the National Guard Armory in Bedford, before it was where it's at now, it used to be, Old Street, you come north on Old and go under the bridge, and there's a big apartment.
That's where I went. That's where I went.
Yeah, that used to
For
be the
just 3
National Guard
years.
Armory, huh?
3 years, I got
Yeah.
out in a hurry.
And but anyway, the Indiana Guards, they was part of the 38th Infantry Division, which was a
Yeah.
15,000 man division of 3 states, and they got activated for World War II.
They
Now,
fought all the way in the Philippines all the way. through.
yeah, they were in the Philippines. They was a famous division. And now in World War One, I don't think there was a guard unit in Indiana went to World War One.
Everybody. I don't think they had National Guard that big. They just took
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. But the 38th Infantry Division, they was at the Philippines. And I knew a lot of. Used to have some guys. We had some generals in the. We had one general in the guards. He could wear the 38th patch on both sides. I knew several of them guys.
Well, sure, because you wear the
combat
combat patch on your right sleeve.
But and the guards, the guards can trace their history back way before. The Continental Army wasn't started until 1775 or 70. The guards can trace their history back to December 13, 1636. The Massachusetts militia.
They're the original Minutemen.
Yeah, yeah. And everyone here, and here in these recent wars, the Indiana Guards deployed a lot of people, and there's been 25 Indiana Guardsmen killed in active, on it. Now a couple of them was in car wrecks, but and I'm not bragging, but I had some interesting,
Oh yeah.
and that Secret Service deal, that was a pretty good deal.
Well, Steve,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
you've been in the Vietnam Veterans Group pretty much since it started, haven't you?
No, actually, it's about a year. Steve Warren,
Yeah.
he kept aggravating me to go, didn't I? I thought it was just Vietnam veterans, but he says Vietnam veterans era veterans.
For
So
veterans that served during the Vietnam era.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, you didn't have a choice where you went. Uncle Sam told you where you were going to
Yeah,
go, and you
you're
just
right.
had to do it. Do you hold any offices in the Vietnam Veterans Organization?
No, not yet. Like I said, I've just been in it a year now, about a year.
Well,
You read kimchi?
Oh, yeah.
You know what kimchi is.
I never did eat it. Honestly, I never did.
Korea had
Never
kimchi.
did.
Yeah. Kimchi
I love
pots.
kimchi.
I'm not a fan of cabbage.
No,
No. Do you have anything else to share in your books?
no, but I will say this. Appreciate, I actually got drafted. It made me grow up. They say, going a boy, come back a man.
Yeah.
And it does.
Yep.
Sure it does.
And even though, thanks to you, and finally I got Agent Orange exposure in Korea. Thanks to you.
Yes, well, no, not
I mean,
thanks.
not you got it, but you put me on to it.
Right, because Agent Orange was sprayed along the DMZ in Korea for the same reason it was sprayed in Vietnam. It was sprayed as a defoliant because your artillery people could not see over into North Korea for all the foliage.
Right.
That same way around the base camps in Vietnam, you couldn't see Charlie coming in towards you because of all the foliage, so you spray Agent Orange and take care of it. I've just had that exact conversation with a veteran today, a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it was sprayed where I was at. Okay, did you have to mow grass while you're over there? Well, no, there wasn't any grass on our compound.
there
You're in the
wasn't.
middle of a jungle and there's no grass on your compound. Didn't you think something
Yeah.
strange about that? He said, I didn't think about it at the time. All right, how many beetles or bugs or spiders did you see crawling through your base camp? None. Don't you think that's a little strange? You're in the middle of a jungle. But yes, the Agent Orange was sprayed on the DMZ.
But I didn't
in
mean
Korea.
that to sound like you, but I mean,
Right.
you put me on to it.
I help the veterans
Yeah.
obtain their benefits for being exposed to Agent Orange.
Yeah.
Yes, I do that, and I'm proud to do it.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
I think I may be the senior service officer in southwestern Indiana now. The gentleman down in Evansville just retired.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had a few years on me, but I think I may be the senior service officer.
You know,
I'll find out Tuesday.
I look back, back when I got drafted, people were going to Canada because they didn't want to go, figured to go in Vietnam, which actually I had an uncle who lived in Canada, but I got to look at, my dad was in World War II over in France, and he was a medic. He served his time there, and then Mom was also over in World War II. She's from England. She served in the British Royal Guard. So she said, actually, she told me before she passed away, she said, D-Day invasion, she actually teletyped, of course there's more than one, the message start the D-Day invasion. I mean, there's more than one person done.
Well, the British women were full on with the war effort. Matter of fact, Eisenhower's driver was a British woman.
Yeah.
But that freed the men up to do combat duties.
So I look back that I wasn't going to go anywhere. I'm just going to take my chances and go, and I'm glad I did. I don't regret it a bit.
But if your number would have came up to go to Vietnam, you'd have went to Vietnam.
Exactly.
Now you said your dad was in World War One.
World War II, yeah.
What was his name?
John Sons was his name.
John Sons.
But he was his medic in France. He took his over in England. That's where he met my mom. Over in England, They took a break or what they called them back then.
R&R.
R&R, yeah, couldn't think of it.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where he met Mom at a dance one night. Dance there in
Your
Southampton.
mom's from France?
Southampton, England.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so that's where he met her, and that's how we all got started, I guess.
I know Marvin.
That's my uncle.
That's your uncle.
Yeah,
I more or less grew up with him in Dutchtown.
Yeah,
I knew the son's name. When you said son, I knew.
Yeah, Marvin, now my
Yeah.
uncle. His boy now runs this. He was in Napa.
He's running that now.
His boys run that Napa store in Bedford now.
Oh, good.
But anyway, no, I look back. It was a great experience. Now I look back at it. At the time I was scared. I like to eat. I was scared because I figured I was going Vietnam. I was going to go if I had to. That's what Dad said. I hope you don't have to go to Vietnam. I said I'll go where they send me. And luckily I done good in an aptitude test when you go in the service. When you first get basic, they give you an aptitude test. Well, I done good in electronics. Here's Ron here talking about Ron. Halfway about through basic, they called me off and said, would you like to go to EOD school? Huh. And I said, well, I think I'll take my chances and all everywhere he sent me. So I didn't go, but I could have went to EOD school. He said, you want to go overseas? I said, nah, I'll take my chances. But it's like they're on, it's one war and you're done, aren't you?
Dangerous job.
Oh, I forgot one. When I was stationed at Fort MacArthur, California, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, that's all right.
It was a small unit there, and we accumulated. We supported a lot of civilian contractors, military contractors, and we had a bunker. Fort MacArthur was right there on San Pedro, right on the ocean, and they had our unit had some of the old bunkers from the coastal artillery on the West Coast in World War II. They built big concrete bunkers, and they had artillery that faced the ocean, and we had some of them bunkers, and we'd accumulate explosive devices, and after a while we had to. And two of my EOD techs in 1972, and one of them was Sergeant Roy Phillips. He was E6 EOD tech. He had married a girl, Francois, he was stationed in EOD in Paris or something. And this gal her name was Francois, the typical French gal. And then the other EOD guy was Denny Hilton, and he was an E4. And he was from Tennessee and married, and I don't think either one of them had kids. But one time, a bunker got full, and they got a commercial Army truck, commercial 2-ton Army truck, and drove from Fort MacArthur to from Fort MacArthur to Fort Irving, California, to the demo range. We didn't have a demo range, and anyway. Then Fort Irving was under the California National Guard, and they picked up the National Guard range NCO, and he went out there with them. And they had this truck, it's a 2-ton, and it's full of stuff. And, explosion happened, and it killed two of my guys and killed the National Guard guy. and there was a boarding.
I'm gonna ask you a question too. Go ahead and finish what you're doing.
But anyway, and this is kind of gruesome, but they had you pile up and they fired non-electric, blasting caps and 2 times, and something happened the last minute. In EOD, when you get ready to set your shots, you start your vehicles and turn them around, because when you pull, you drive down the road. And they had 2 vehicles, the Army commercial truck and the National Guard guy had a vehicle. Well, something happened the last minute. And my E6, and this is kind of gruesome, but and my E6, we think he was right by the shot. Well, explosional, the worst of it is, and then stuff will go up. We think Roy was right close and he went up, but the two guys went this way, and it was pretty bad.
Now,
and we found, I got the personal effects after it, and both of my guys was married, and we only found 1 wedding ring, and it was blackened from the farm ball. And I showed it to the guys in the unit, and we say, well, that's Roy's. Well, we picked the wrong widow. I give it to Francois on this.
I got to ask you a question. We work with bombs all the time, loading up bombs on B-17s.
Uh-huh.
But they wouldn't explode because we didn't have the fuse in them.
Yeah.
Is that a familiar thing that he used? Did you work with anything that had to have a fuse?
Oh, yeah. We like them bombs in Vietnam that we found, the B-50, they were still fused.
It was harmless.
Huh?
It was harmless until you fused it.
Yeah, but these is bombs that had dropped, and they had fuses in them.
Yeah, but I'm just asking for myself. I'm not.
Oh, yeah,
I'm just trying to find out.
Yeah,
something.
they're not dangerous unless they're fused.
Okay.
Now in Vietnam, we didn't really disarm. We just go up and put C4 on and blow them in place.
You answered my question because I
but-
always wondered about why we didn't have more accidents.
Yeah, but yeah, till that fuse, and like them the ones you dropped, that fuse didn't arm till it went down.
Had a propeller on.
Yeah, and I was trained in all them fuses. There was different kinds of fuses and they dropped some 10,000-pound bombs in Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
Out of C-130s, they'd open the back door and kick them out, and they'd come out. But a lot of them bombs in Vietnam, the 250s, the 500s, 250s was the norm, and they had fins on them that was retarded, and once they dropped from the aircraft, these fins were metal, but they'd flop out like an umbrella, and to help the descent, and then that fuse wouldn't arm, that fuse wouldn't arm till it went so far, but all them fuses I was trained in, all them fuses wouldn't, but like my 2 guys that got killed, we think they had some powder cans with detonators in them from a commercial contractor, but the official board of inquiries, see out there in Fort Irving and Death Valley, it's out in Death Valley. There's people out there running around in 4-wheel pickups with guns and playing cowboys and Indians. And the official board of inquiries thinks somebody out there with some civilian with a high-powered rifle maybe shot into the shot at the left. They had everything unloaded and getting ready to pull when something happened. And now there's talk that the fuse lighter, when you pull non-electric, you have a fuse lighter, and then you have the time fuse, and then you have det core. And it was a big, it's a 2-ton truckload of stuff. And then there's talk that something happened with the fuse lighter. But Roy was a competent they was both competent EOD guys.
This has been a good education on bombs, but I'm about ready.
But Roy had his head and all his limbs was gone, and then they were in bad shape. And we found 1 wedding ring.
Steve, you probably had problems with the ordnance in your missiles, in particular with the fuel sections. I know in the Air Force, that was one of the worst disasters we had, was a fuel cell went haywire.
We was out one day. It's a Hawk missile. They're obsolete now, but they were taking one off the launcher, and the thing slipped. And that lieutenant, I was driving the thing that lifted it off there. He said, "Don't move, because me and you both gonna be in the army the rest of our lives if that goes off." You know. And so,
See, I was trained in Hawk missiles too. There's EOD procedure.
yeah, but no, that's about the only I remember anything, because I was up in the thing watching radar screen most of the time in North Korea, like an airport control tower. I was in the thing watching.
Well, you have to watch for incoming aircraft to fire your missiles on the incoming aircraft.
Lock
if
on them, and
North Korea or China is getting ready to invade.
yeah,
Yep.
heat seeker. It's a heat seeker of the missile. Yeah.
Our time is getting ready to expire here.
I did pretty good.
I want to thank you guys for coming. Steve, you got anything else to add?
No, I appreciate you asking me.
Well, thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Ron, you got anything more to add?
No, I talked.
Lee, how about you?
I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for the
It's been
service.
very informative. I blew up everything.
Well, thanks again for coming. Thank all my friends here for their service. I'm Brad Bough, Vice President of the Lawrence County Historical Society, and I want to remind you that if you love your freedom, be sure to thank a vet. So long, everyone. We'll see you next time.